All right, welcome everybody. So today we're going to talk about finding the area of a triangle using trig. So we're going to start off back in elementary school or middle school. Hopefully you've learned that the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So it would be the distance of this for our base times the height of the triangle. We also know that if we want to find the like sine C, that would be opposite, which is h, over the hypotenuse of that right triangle, which is a. So that side right there. And because we know this, we can also solve for h. That's this guy right here. We can solve for him by just multiplying both sides by a. So I can multiply that side by a and that side by a. And that would give me h equals a times sine c. So we can plug that in, and that's kind of where this formula comes from. So the area of a triangle could also be written not just as 1/2 base times height, but 1/2 base, and we can substitute in this a sine c, so we can substitute a sine c of the triangle. So we're going to use this formula in order to figure out the area of a triangle, because we're not always given height, but we can kind of deduct it by doing this formula. All right. Super important when you're doing this is the sides that you choose, all right? The two sides have to be the one that make the angle. So the angle should be in between those two sides. So for instance, let's do number 1. I want to find the area of this triangle. So I'm going to use my formula. The area formula equals 1/2. And I'm going to have a base number, and then I'm going to have the other side's number. And then the sine should be the angle that is created by those two sides. So in this case, the angle created by the purple and the red is 110. So 110 will end up being my sine. I'm going to plug that in. And then I have a base on one side is 12 and the other side is 15. I'll just plug these numbers in. And of course, we can use a calculator to kind of simplify this. We got 1/2 of 12 is 6, and 6 times 15 gives us a grand total of 90, and then we have sine 110. Remember, sine 110 is just a decimal, so this is the exact answer for the area. And then if I wanted the approximation, remember, approximation is what you plug into the calculator. So the exact answer is what we plug in, and the approximation is the decimal that you get from the calculator. My mistake. And I want both of those. So the approximation, when I plug in 90 sine 110, should be 84.57 centimeters squared. Sorry, because it's area, so we want to square our units. All right, so we have 2 to practice. I would like you to pause the video, do 2 and 3. We'll come back. I'll give you those answers, and then we're going to move on to a little bit of extra work kind of ones, and then we're going to be using law of sine and law of cosine in order to find the area. So again, pause the video and then come back after you have it done, and then I will tell you what those answers are. All right, so hopefully you have number 2 done. The correct answer, if you used it right, now we had a couple choices here. The two sides you had to choose. Now you can flip-flop the B and the A, but they have to be using the 6, and you have to use the 8. Not the 8.4, that was just an extra number there to kind of throw you off. So be careful about that. It has to be the two sides that create the angle. So you have to choose the 6 and the 8, and then you have 72. So you should have come to the area. The exact answer would be 24 sine 72 degrees. And then the approximation, when we plugged it into your calculator, should be 22.83. And that is meters squared. And both of these are technically meters squared. I should have that up there. Just like this should have said centimeters squared. So those are our 2 answers, our exact right here, and our approximation. So this is what we plug into the calculator, and this is what we get when we get plugged it into the calculator. Sorry. All right, so let's jump to 3. So hopefully, again, that one had that little trick. You had all 3 sides, but the only 2 we want are the 2 that create the angle. And the angle I have is 25 degrees. So I'm going to need to use the 23.5 and the 24 when I do my formula. And finally, number 3's answer is 282 sine 25. And this is in inches, so it would be inches squared. And then the approximation would be 119.18 or 0.2. I'm fine if you just go to the 1 decimal spot, but you can go out 2 if you'd like that too. So whichever one you like. But make sure you at least go out to a decimal spot. That way I know you actually did do the rounding. So get that kind of circled up. So there's kind of using trig to find area of a triangle. Kind of easy. Let's get a little bit complicated problem. So let's kind of build it up. Again, I've been given 2 angles, and if I look at them, I'm going to kind of show them both ways. I've been given this side, and I've been given this side. So I kind of like to color for these 2 sides. The problem is I was not given the angle in between, and if I wanted to find the area, I'm going to need to figure out what that angle is in between. So of course I'm going to use our wonderful knowledge that all the angles inside a triangle need to equal 180. So I know 81 plus 43 plus my missing angle, which is what I want, all of those have to equal 180 degrees. And I can go ahead and solve this, and you should get that your missing angle is 56. So I'm going to plug in 56, and now I can find the area of my triangle using my area formula. So I got 1/2, and again, I'm going to plug in the red side and the green side, and then I have sine of 56. So going ahead and plugging in those numbers. So the red one was 49.2, and the green one was 34. And then again, I'm going to use a calculator. I'm going to simplify, and by simplifying, I'm just going to basically multiply those 3 things together. That gives me my exact answer. When I do that, you should have 282. And then that sign just kind of tags on at the end. And this is inches again, or oh, this isn't inches, and I'm looking at the wrong answer. Sorry about that. Do that one again. So down at the bottom, that is actually 836.4. Sorry about that, sine 56. We'll look at which problem I'm doing. And then that is actually in feet. So that should be feet squared. And then the approximation is me actually plugging this now all into the calculator, including the sine, and I get 693.41 feet. So I don't always have to have the height of a triangle in order to find the area. We can always resort to trig to help us out. So there's my exact answer, and there's my approximation. All right, again, pause the video, try number 5, calculate out that missing angle, and then see if you can get to the area, and then come back, and I will go ahead and give you the answer. All right, well, welcome back. Hopefully you got it. So again, the 2 sides, I always like highlighting so I know I'm looking at the right sides. This side connects to this side, so that's the missing angle, once again, that I would have to find. Using that, you should have came to this angle is 125 degrees. Oops, that's my little degree side. And then I'm going to go ahead and give you the answers, as I said. So the exact answer for this should be 119 if you multiplied everything correctly, and then sine 125, and it's inches, or no, meters squared. So meters squared. And then the approximation would be me just plugging this into the calculator, 119 sine 125, and you should roughly have 97.48 meters squared. So these are kind of the basic ones. It's kind of nice when we get them. They're kind of straightforward. The most we had to do is calculate out one of our degrees. But we haven't had to use law of sine or cosine in order to find this. So we are going to turn our page, and we have some of those to deal with. So let's go ahead and turn our page and start working on these ones. Okay, so we're looking at this. I do have a degree. I have my sides. I want to find the area. So I'm going to look here, and I'm going to highlight again. So I have this side, that's 7, and I have this side, which is 12. But I am missing this angle. So I was missing the other one, and I could use my like all angles equal 180, which makes things nice. The problem here is I only have 1 degree. I don't even have the other degree. So I need to figure out what this is. I would try to do law of cosines first. I'd be like, oh, I have the 2 sides. Can I find the missing angle? But I can't because I don't have that third side that would help me use the law of cosines. So I'm going to use law of sines instead. So we kind of talked about that one. I do have this degree. Opposite of it is 12. So I'm going to write my proportions. I'm going to go sine 93 over 12 equals, and then I'm going to look here, and the other side I have is this 7. So I'm going to have to use 7. But the angle opposite of 7, as hard as it might be, is actually this angle up here. So I'm going to end up finding out what this angle is. But if I can figure out that angle, I can then once again go into finding the missing third angle, basically. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put sine x, because I need to find out what that angle is. And then if you remember law of sines, we're just going to go ahead and cross multiply. So this would give me, I don't want to do that, let's do this all in red so we keep the right angle colors. Right, so 7 sine 93 equals 12 times sine x. I'm going to divide by the 12. And I basically have sine x equals this wonderful little entire equation. Now to get an angle, remember that we use the inverse. So if I want x to be by itself, I'm going to type in the calculator sine -1 and all of this. So 7 sine 93 all over 12. All right, that's the exact answer for this one. Now we at this point are going to have to approximate, so we're going to be dealing with some approximations when it comes to these degrees on the inside of our triangle. So I'm going to erase these little dotted lines so we can get this. I type this into a calculator and I get, now remember, we're looking for an angle. So we have two angles. We have quadrant 1's angle and we have quadrant 2's. We do actually have to check both of them. So I'll type this into the calculator. He's always going to stick with the first quadrant. That is 35.6 degrees. So this is what it popped out when I got that degree. I need to figure out what quadrant 2's is. To do that, I'm just going to take that. I'm going to kind of go off to here to the side. I'm going to take 180, because remember quadrant 2 is in the second quadrant, so that's between 90 and 180. I'm going to subtract the 35.6, and that should give me the 144.4. So these are my two possible angle degrees using law of sines that this red angle could be. So I need to check to see if both of them can actually work. So I turn around 35 plus 93, that is definitely less than 180. So this one is good. But when I do 93 plus 144, that is bigger than 180. That one does not work. So I can go ahead and cross this one off. The only one that could possibly work is this one. So that's the only option we have. So I'm going to plug that in. That's this angle right here, 35.6. Now calculating off that missing angle, the one I want, the blue one, that's the one that's going to help me out with the area of a triangle. Just going to do that wonderful 180s again. So we're dealing with a lot of 180s. And that gives me 51.4. So that's the degree for that angle. Now that I did all of that work, remember in the end, I'm trying to find the area of a triangle. So I'm going to come back here, and I finally get to plug in my two sides that create the triangle, or create the angle that I wanted. And the angle I wanted was the 51.4. So I'm going to plug in 51.4. And then the two sides that created that blue angle were 7 and 12. And it's a lot easier to take half of 12. So that would end up being 6, and 6 times 7 is 42. So the area of this would be, oops, I don't know why I'm writing 1/2, is 42 sine 51.4. So 42 sine 51.4. And then the approximation, again, is just me plugging this into the calculator, and then that's when I do my approximation, which is 32.8. And I should put my unit measurements, that is feet squared, and I'll put them on both the exact and the approximation. So having to use law of sines in order to figure out the area of a triangle, let's have you do 7 and 8. Those both use law of sines, and check to see how well you did with those ones, and then we'll come back and use law of cosines. All right, so hopefully you had some time to kind of look at number 7, give it a try. I like to, again, you can see me color coding. I am going to draw this side. I'm going to make him red. This one I do know. I've been given 2 degrees, so I kind of have 2 choices here. I can either choose this side by the 114. I'd have to figure out what that side, or I could figure out this kind of longer side. So either way, I'm going to want to kind of figure out one of these sides. I'm going to notice that one of the sides are missing. So I'm going to use law of sines to find that side. Let's see. That would be opposite of that one. That would be opposite of this one. Kind of trying to figure out which is the best one. Oh, I also know what's the opposite of the side. I do know. Get that put in there real quick. So you should have calculated that these three angles I can always find. That's going to be 38 degrees. So just remember that all three need to equal 180. So that's how I got that one. All right, so I have the red one. Guess I should have done that in red. So I have the red one, that's 38 degrees, and I have his opposite side. So I'm definitely going to use the 38 over 20 for sure. And then I got to choose one of the other two. So for me, I'm going to choose this side right here. By choosing that side, I can see I'm going to use sine 114. So I'm going to say that equals sine 114, and then that's the side I'm looking for. And the good news is I'm looking for a side, so I don't need to do this check of quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. We only have to do that when we're looking for angles using law of sines. So once I get done with this, I have that actual side. So I cross multiply. You did all of that, hopefully. Kind of shorthanding this as quickly as I can. Sorry if it's a little bit messy. All right, that gives me x equals 35. Wait a minute, where am I getting 35? It should be 38. I can do this. So 30. Okay, I'm going to pause this real quick. Making kind of a mess. Sorry. So it should be 20 sine 114 over sine 38. I keep seeing that 38 and I keep trying to write that. So this 114 all divided by sine 38. And this gives us roughly, if we plug it into a calculator, 29.68. Again, it's the length of the side, so I don't actually need to check any of the degrees like I had to on number 6. Makes life a little easier, right? Should have plugged that into the formula, and we'll shorthand this and give you the answer. So hopefully you plugged it in. What I got, exact answers if you use the green side, should be 296.8 sine 28. That's the side, the angle that was included on that, inches squared. If you use the other one, you'd have a different answer, but you should all have the same approximation, which is 139.34 inches squared. So that's number 7. All right, let's jump to number 8. Again, same kind of scenario here. I have one of the sides, I can see that, and then I believe I chose this side to find, so I used law of sines again for that. That should have been 23.3 for that length of that side. And then if I plug it into the area formula, my exact answer, if you use that side, was 407.75 sine 82 miles squared. And then the approximation for that answer would be 403.78 miles squared. All right, so that's using law of sines. So again, you might want to look up your law of sines. The angle is the only one that kind of causes a problem. Now let's use law of cosines. So as I can see, I've been given a ton here. I've been given, well, a ton. I've given all 3 sides. So I'm going to choose 2 of the sides. In my case, I'm just going to choose the 21 and the 23. But it really doesn't matter. You just need to choose 2. If these are the 2 sides I want, that means this is the angle that I want. So now I'm going to use law of cosines. Now, law of cosines basically says this guy is the one that's kicked out. He's not the one included. So that's going to be 15 squared equals my 2 sides, the 21 squared plus the 23 squared. So that's just our Pythagorean theorem, minus 2 times those 2 sides. So our 2 sides were 21 and 23. And then it would be cosine, because this is a law of cosines, the angle that was included. And I don't know what that angle is, so I'm going to put x. And that means I'm going to be solving for an angle. And the nice thing about law of cosines, as much as it's bigger, once we're done, there's no checks. We don't have to worry about it being an angle or versus a side, all that stuff. All right? So when I solve this, 15 squared is 225. Kind of do this one. And then I went ahead and did these parts kind of together. So I went ahead and did 21 squared plus 23 squared. That gives me 970. And then I did this part right here, the 2 times this. It gives me minus 966 cosine x. So I just kind of tag them on at the end. And then I just solve this equation. So I'm going to minus the 970 on both sides, and then I will divide by the 966. Sorry. And that is negative 966. Don't forget that he's negative. And over here is a negative answer, which is fine. That gives me 745. Last thing, as I said, I was going to divide by that. Get that. And that turns it positive. So I know I'm going to kind of switch. I'm going to go cosine x equals this positive 745 over 966. Remember, if I want to use the angle measure, I'm going to use the inverse. I'm going to say cosine negative 1. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that 745 over 966. Plug that into a calculator. He's going to give me the rough estimate of about 39 degrees, 39.53, since I'm estimating. So that means that this is 39.53, and I can finally jump into my area formula. So all that work just to get that little angle. And then my area formula again is that 1/2 my 2 sides, the 21 and the 23, and then sine 39.53. So simplify that. Sorry, let me write this stuff in here. All right, again, we get our calculator. So our exact answer for this one would be 241.5 sine 39.553 if you'd like. And then our approximation, what we plug into the calculator, is we get finally 153.6. And these are millimeters squared, so they should be millimeters squared. So there's my final answer for that one. All right, you got 1 to try with law of cosines. We'll come back and we'll get that answer for that last one, number 10. And then we're, all right, so the 2 sides that I chose was the 17 and I chose the 22. So if you chose a different one, you might have a different exact answer, but you should all have the exact same area, so the approximation. So if you're giving the wrong area, then your answer for the exact one is incorrect. So the first thing I would have to do is figure out what that x is, that angle right there. If I did it, you should have came out to 48 degrees for that top angle right up at the top there. All right, and I used cosine negative 1, and that would be 500.75 over 748. So that's how I got the 48. That roughly equals 48. All right, as for the actual area formula, my actual answer would be 187 sine 48. And my approximation, when I plug it in, now this is the one that if you have this wrong, then you know that you did this one wrong. So I got roughly 138.97, and these are meters, so these are going to be meters squared. So if you got it wrong, try redoing it. Maybe use the 2 sides I did, see if you can get it right that way. Other than that, start on your homework. Good luck.